And it's a particular pleasure to introduce to you this evening someone who normally doesn't exist, a translator.
Yes.
Anne Goldstein must be one of the first translators in history, I think, unless you can think of any exceptions, to be a star. On the world stage, not just in Russia or Cambridge, as people are sometimes. Only Scott Moncrief, is it C.K. Scott Moncrief? Proust's translator comes to mind in the English-speaking world as someone with that kind of celebrity status. So welcome to Melbourne.
Thank you.
Goldstein.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's much nicer than Sydney.
I've heard.
Yes. What Anne makes of her celebrity status, she will perhaps tell us a little later as we talk about this practically invisible but vital art, the art of translation. Now, most of you probably know her as the woman who has brought Elena Ferrante into your lives, hence your beaming faces. I can see them from here. But Anne Goldstein has also translated Leopardi, Paolo Pasolini, and others, overseeing the translation of Primo Levi's complete works. More recently translated a short work of Jhumpa Lahiri, the Bengali American writer who's been living in Rome. I think she's just come back to America.
She's come back, yeah.
Yes. You might know some of her novels in English. And she is also head of the copy department at the New Yorker magazine. Is that the right expression? Head
Yes.
of the copy department?
Yes.
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 But she's in the limelight, I think, don't you agree? Because she is the translator of Elena Ferrante's 4-volume Neapolitan saga, whoever Elena Ferrante might be. And Goldstein, should we care who she is?
I don't think so, no. I think that her works, her books speak for her, and I think that the actual person isn't important. I think that there's a real presence in the novels of a voice, not literally the narrators of the novels, but someone who is an intelligence that's putting those words together and bringing us these characters, and I think that we should be satisfied with that. Do you think we want more? We need more?
Well, theoretically I agree with you.
Yeah.
But a little bit of me would kind of like to know a bit more. And I disapprove of myself wanting to know more. But it's just human nature, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, and to an extent, she's, especially in the past couple of years, she's been more present in doing interviews by email only, or by writing. And she's actually publishing in the fall. There's a new book coming out of letters to her publishers, of interviews, and I think that she is somewhat revealing in some of those talks and interviews about herself.
Well, you see, I think that I want to know because the 4-volume saga has a certain intimacy to it.
Right.
Don't you agree?
Yes, very much so.
It's as if she's taking me and everyone here tonight individually into her confidence. And if that's the case, you kind of want to know who is taking you into her confidence. So that's why I excuse myself for this unhealthy interest in who she really is and whether it's actually 2 people and whether there's a man involved. Which I thought maybe was the case when I read a couple of the sex scenes, I have to say. But that's for another conversation. Now, Ferrante told Jhumpa Lahiri, who wrote to her and received a letter in reply.
That's right, yeah.
I am my writing. And when I first heard that, when I heard Jhumpa Lahiri say this, Jhumpa Lahiri is the most beautiful Bengali writer who speaks the most beautiful English, of course, as Bengalis so often do. And beautiful Italian, I presume. I don't speak Italian. when I heard that she had said, "I am my writing," I thought, oh, that's very moving. And then I thought, just a minute.
What does that mean? Yeah.
No, you're not. I mean, I write. Mm-hmm. I'm not my writing. Mm-hmm. I'm Robert, I live in Hobart. My writing is books. And the voice in my writing isn't the same voice I use in Hobart. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So I thought it was a bit disingenuous
to say that.
To say that to
Yeah.
Lahiri, who was
Yeah.
terribly impressed.
Yeah, yeah. No, well, I mean, I can see it both ways. I mean, she is her writing in the sense that she presents herself as, she presents her books as herself, or as her writing self. She separates herself from her books, and so she is saying that she is in the books, I think.
Yes.
Or as far as she wants to be known.
As far as she wants to be known.
It doesn't satisfy you.
What did you feel? What were your emotions and your intellectual response the first time you read one of her books? You read one of her earlier books, didn't you?
The Days of Abandonment. Yeah, that was the first one I read.
Yes. What did you feel?
I felt that this was I was completely gripped by that book when I read it. I was reading it because I was going to translate it. Actually, I think I was reading because I wasn't sure I was going to translate it, but I was reading it, and I felt that this was someone who was, I was in the mind of someone that I recognized, that I was sort of gripping in the way that you recognize something, it's sort of expressing things that you might not have wanted to express yourself, or expressing them in ways that you wouldn't have been able to express yourself, and that it was compelling, and I couldn't get out of it, and yet sometimes I wanted to get out of it.
Would there have been things about friendship?
Not in that book.
Not in that book.
That's a book about...
It's about mothers, or?
That book is essentially about a woman whose husband leaves her.
Leaves her.
And it's about her relationship with him and her relationship with her children and with herself, essentially.
So would you say that you loved her writing?
I don't know if I loved her writing, but I certainly loved what she did with it.
Oh, that's an interesting distinction.
I loved her writing. It isn't that I felt that she was writing beautiful sentences. I felt that she was writing sentences that were necessary to her.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that expressed expressed what she wanted to express in the way that she wanted to express it.
I wondered, you see, whether a translator, in your opinion, mm-hmm. needs to love what he or she is translating.
No, I don't think so. I think I've translated things that I didn't love, especially. I always loved something about them, or I learned something from them, but I don't necessarily always love them the same amount.
No. Yet there is an intimacy that the translator mm-hmm. has with the text, a playfulness sometimes, that is very much like a lover's intimacy and playfulness. Is that not so?
Yes, no, that's true. That is true.
And the translator pretends to be faithful, just like a lover, but isn't always.
Yes, very true.
Are you sometimes not faithful?
Well, no, I actually try to be very faithful. And when I think that I'm not being faithful, I go back to that lover, so to speak, and make sure that I'm still being faithful.
So you don't take liberties?
I try not to take too many liberties. Yes, I do take liberties. You have to take liberties, I think, in order sometimes, because the literal faithfulness just doesn't work in your own language. So I think you do have to sometimes take liberties. But I try not to take too many.
Why doesn't it work?
Because, in the case of Italian, Italian is able to do things. The syntax of Italian is more flexible than that of English. It has, I think you said you translate from Russian. Italian has gender, for example. It means that an adjective, this is a very concrete example, But it means that an adjective doesn't have to necessarily be near its noun. Italian verbs you don't need a pronoun with the verb, so you can move things around in a way that you can't in English. So I would say that English sometimes has to be more, the sentences can't be quite as flexible.
You find English in some ways more pedestrian?
I wouldn't say pedestrian, but certainly it's a little more rigid.
Yes, certainly more rigid than Russian. Right? So do you love Italian?
Do I love Italian? I do, yes.
You love it?
I do.
Because you started to learn it not when you were very young.
No, I was quite old.
Well, you weren't.
No,
quite
not old, but...
in 1987 or something like that, you started. And something about this language, as opposed to Swahili or Nepalese or Chinese or Japanese, something about it.
It gripped me. It did. I mean,
I want to know what.
Well, originally I learned, I wanted to learn Italian because I wanted to read Dante in Italian. I mean, Dante is, I had read Dante in college, I guess, and I was very, it was very important to me to read Dante. Dante is like it's the exploration of someone exploring his life. And I think when you're a person in your, I don't know, late teens, early 20s, the idea of exploring your life is a compelling one. So there was that aspect of it, but it was also that it was, I mean, it's literature, history, everything is in Dante. The world is in Dante. And I wanted to read it in the original Italian. That's why I learned Italian.
What about the enormous amount enormous number of religious references in Dante? These would be references that you were not probably brought up with.
No, but you know, I read a version with notes explaining all these things. I mean, there are the Italian versions of Dante are like 3 lines of text, and then the rest of the page is notes. So you're sort of reading an essay when you're reading it in Italian, or at least I did.
What do you think of the translations that most of us would have read of Dante? I mean, I've read the Penguin edition only of Dante, and of course I have no way of judging.
No, I mean, Dante, there's 100 translations of Dante. I think there have been like 3 or 4 in the past couple of years. People are always working on it, yes. It's just,
Clive James.
Clive James, Robert Hollander, Robert Pinsky did the Inferno. I mean, just a lot of people want to do it. I don't know why. To me, it seems much too difficult.
Yes, it must be. Well, I want to come back to translation, but first I want to talk about love, because most of the people here have probably been infected by what the Sydney Writers' Festival at least is calling Ferrante Fever.
Yeah.
They love Elena Ferrante. Now, I want to talk about what you might think is the source of this great love. It can't be the language, really, I don't think.
No, I don't think it is the language. I mean, I think it's similar to what I was saying about the days of abandonment. I mean, I think she takes a friendship. She also takes all the relationships of. I mean, it is a saga. It's 60 years of Italian history, and I think that, and it's the story of the lives, really, of this community, and how people leave, people stay, people come back. But it's the story of the relationships in people's lives, their relationships with their parents, their mothers particularly, their children, their lovers, and their friends. And I think that she is able to examine, as some people have said, forensically, these relationships in ways that let us discover or name things that we might not want to name.
That's well put, to name things, because I think this is one reason that we often love a writer, that the writer has given us the words to say what we've been striving to say.
I think that's right, yeah.
And they may not be particularly
Yeah.
poetic words, isn't that right?
No,
Or particularly clever words.
No.
But they are the words. Mm-hmm. And so we feel liberated by that, don't we?
I think that's right, yeah.
One of the words that I've heard you discussing is the Italian word smarginatura.
Yeah.
You're probably tired of talking about
No, I'm always happy to talk about it.
Smarginatura apparently means something like the blurring of lines of separation between two things or two people, the margins, in other words, hence the syllable margina in the middle of that word. It helps, doesn't it, to have this Italian word when we start thinking about our friendships and our loves and our families.
Yeah, it is helpful. I mean, it's actually not even it's a word that it's a printing word, a typography word.
Oh, is
having
it?
to do with margins and cutting off margins
Oh, is
or
it?
bleeding margins. Yeah, I mean, it's both bleeding margins and trimming margins. It actually literally means trimming the margins.
Oh.
So it's not a normal Italian word. I mean, it's a specialized Italian word, and she takes it and she actually says that she's sort of straining the meaning of it. So again, it's interesting. She's taking this word and using it to mean the margins, but it comes to have this meaning of margins, of having no margins. I mean, that's the original in the first book where Leela has the experience that she calls smarginatura. Is this sense of things blurring, of things losing their edges.
Yet they are at the same time always coming apart, and these two friends. And,
yes.
And drawing a line of demarcation.
Mm-hmm. And then losing it.
And losing it again.
Yeah.
And parents must do it with children. I mean, I don't have children, I only have dogs, really, and it's not quite the same.
Well.
But I did try to find a word. You see, I didn't know this word. Smarginatura. And in the last book that I wrote, I tried to explain how I felt about my partner, a partner I love very much and have spent 35 years with. And I thought, what is the English word to describe the fact that we are different, but we blend in to each other? And I used the word continue each other. I said we continue each other. That's the only word I could come up with, because I don't really like blur.
No, I think continue is a great word. But again, you're using a word in a slightly different way than it would ordinarily be used, which is what she's doing with this smarginatura. So, very good.
I think that most of the people here, or let's say half the people here, and they have no opportunity so far to disagree with me, so I will just keep saying what I think. Probably are very taken with the theme, as I am, because it's one of the themes that I live for, of friendship, in this case between two women. Friendship is so little written about, don't you find?
I do think that, and I think that's one of the reasons these books are popular.
It must be.
Yeah, especially in such detail and over a lifetime.
60 years.
60 years, yeah.
We write about erotic love. We write about falling in love. And there are one or two scenes where it seems to me there is an eroticism.
Yeah, definitely.
Where she's washing
her
friend before the wedding. Is that when she's washing her friend? But it's not an erotic friendship. It's so much bigger than that. And I like the fact, because you see, I think this is what makes a good friendship, and I almost never come across it in literature or at the movies. I like friends who are rivals, who are, as Emerson said, and I've talked about this before, beautiful enemies.
That's a great phrase.
And these two women are beautiful enemies.
Yeah, they are.
They burn each other's works.
Yes. Yeah.
They insult each other, they quarrel with each other. That is the best kind, because you are friends that are caught in a kind of monkey grip, if that is the right expression. You strain against each other, but the straining only holds you closer together, and it does with them.
Yes. And that's, I think that the rival part is one of the things that people have a hard time dealing with in their friendships, and the fact that she writes about it so sort of in such a raw way.
Difficulty, you think?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, I don't know. That's my experience, maybe.
Really? Do you think that's an Anglo-Saxon thing? Do you think that's a... I wonder whether Spanish readers would find the same difficulty, or...
I don't know. I actually have no idea. I'm just guessing that rivalry between women is I mean, with your friends, there's a lot of a sense that you need to stay together, and so you don't want to really deal with the rivalry part. So,
no,
I don't know.
But if you can deal with it, it seems to me, and I think it's true of men as well, if you can deal with it, it is immensely strengthening and deepening.
Oh, no, I agree. But I mean, I'm saying that Ferrante's ability to delve into that, to go into that, is a kind of liberating thing for...
Yes.
Has
for
it
some
affected
women.
your friendships, or not really?
No, not really. I don't think so. I don't know, actually.
I'm sure
think so.
that reading about that sort of thing, it does affect how I act out the role of friend. It liberates me not to be, I don't know, quite so nice.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe.
I mean, I was brought up to be really nice. It's a very Christian thing. We should all be like Jesus. Not that Jesus was terribly nice
No.
always, I must say.
No.
He could be very snappy. But you are brought up in our sort of society, particularly in the better suburbs, to be nice.
Yes. No,
And I think it's very
absolutely
liberating
true.
to think,
That you
I
don't
can
have
be a
to
good
be-
friend without being nice
Yeah,
all the time.
I think that's true. Yeah.
The other thing I'm sure that we all like, but why do we like it, is the sensation of being enveloped by a world which is and is not our world. We are
Yes.
not Neapolitans. There may be some
Right.
Neapolitans here tonight, but by and large, we are not Neapolitans.
Right.
We are Australians, we are Melburnians, or in my case, not even that. But we're not so foreign, so we are enveloped in this world which is our world and yet not our world. This is terribly exciting.
Yes, I think that's true, and I think that the world, the sense of the creation of a world, is another one of the reasons that people love these books. I mean, and it's a world over, as I keep saying. I mean, in the course of 60 years. So you see this world change. You see the people change. You see the people die. They have children. Their children have children. I mean, it's a saga.
But you could say that about a soap opera, all the things you've just said.
Yes, well, and of course, Ferrante is a little bit of a soap opera-ish writer in certain ways. I mean, she herself says that she wants to use every technique that there is. She wants to be read. She wants her readers to turn the pages. And yes, there is something a little bit there. You could argue that there is something soap opera-ish about it. However, I don't think most soap operas do dig into things in the same way.
No, that's the difference, isn't it?
Yeah.
They don't have the depth. They might have the choreography, but they don't have the depth.
Right. Yeah.
I want to talk about the word Greek. It's Elena's surname, Greco.
Greco. Yeah.
She marries into a family of Greek scholars, does she not?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And throughout the book, you have this, it seems to me, very classical Greek
Absolutely.
theme.
Yeah. I mean,
Talk
she
to me
studies,
a little bit about it.
Well, she studies, Romans, actually. Dido is a very important figure for her. Not exactly Greek, but classical.
Classical.
She studies Greek and Latin in high school. Yes, the Greco, I think it's not an uncommon name in Naples, actually. But
there is the Persephone, how do you pronounce the word? Demeter?
yeah,
Yes.
well, I say Demeter, I don't know.
In more than one book of hers, there is something about this lost daughter,
The
lost mother.
daughter. Yeah, that's true.
And perhaps in all of us there is this deep fear of losing the mother. I mean, my first book was about losing a mother, finding a mother. I mean, my best friend's first book was about losing a mother, finding a mother.
Interesting.
Father, I don't care about fathers.
No, these people don't care so much about fathers either.
Nobody cares about fathers, do they?
The mothers are crucial.
It's mothers, they're crucial.
Yeah, I mean, her relationship with her mother is difficult and even violent, but also in the end loving in some way.
In some ways.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we really believe that, but it is. Yeah, I mean, it is to some extent. I mean, her mother actually is an example of someone who is very harsh, but because she's desperate for her to succeed. But yeah, there is this Greek. She does marry the Greek, the Greek scholar, the person from the absolute opposite background that she comes from. From this kind of high socialist, wealthy family from the north, and it turns out that she feels in the end that she doesn't belong in this family. It was kind of a mistake, I think. Well, maybe not.
Yes.
But I think, it's a mistake she had to make, I think, to find out that her role was not to be a classical Greek person.
Not to be?
Not to be a classical Greek person,
yes.
But to be, in fact, a Neapolitan. I mean, that she doesn't lose her, she can't really, she can't lose her Neapolitanness, the place that she came from, the neighborhood, but she also, in the end, doesn't really necessarily belong to the neighborhood anymore. It's a complicated issue. It's a whole
Naples was once a Greek city, wasn't it?
Yes, and Neapolis.
Neapolis.
Yeah.
I think it's really a great loss for most of us. I don't know how many other people here tonight would agree with me, but we do not know our Greek literature. We do not know. No. By and large, there will be people here who do, but by and large, we don't know who Persephone is. We don't know who Demeter is.
I must say, I hadn't thought about the Persephone-Demeter aspect of it, which I think is really a good way to think about it. I mean, the Lost Daughter,
Greeks
I guess,
said it all, you see.
Yeah, well, they did.
And it can't be an accident.
No.
I mean, the woman who is writing these books clearly knows her Greek literature.
Yes, and I think she's actually said that she did study classics.
And I really regret that I didn't. I gave it up at school after 1 year, and I did other things. And I regret it because somehow Greek classical literature, I think more than Roman, it grounds you, don't you think?
I do think so, yeah.
As a human being, as a European in particular.
Yeah.
The other thing that she does, I mean, this is difficult to talk about, and I know that we have to move on. It's already 8 o'clock. But it always interests me, Leela, when she's quite young, she is encountered by a school teacher with a copy of Ulysses, talking about the Greeks.
Yeah.
But Ulysses, not the Odyssey.
Yeah.
Under her arm, and the teacher says, what's that? And she says the title is Ulysses. It's in the street. And the teacher says, is it about the Odyssey? Never having heard of James Joyce, but presumably. No, says Leela, it's about how prosaic life is today. I'm quoting you, of course. Oh. And so, says the teacher, that's all. It says that our heads are full of nonsense, that we are flesh, blood, and bone, that one person has the same value as another, that we want only to eat, drink, fuck. And I think this is brilliant. I mean, that isn't actually what James Joyce's book is about. That doesn't matter. What matters is that that's how Leela sees it. And that all literature, excuse me, I'll just cough. All literature, I think, has to come face to face with this problem of how to redeem the prosaic. Isn't that so? I mean, at some level, unless you're Henry VIII, your life is fairly prosaic.
Yeah.
Really. And we have to find a way to make it extraordinary. And I don't know how she did it, but Ferrante has found a way.
Yeah.
So how did she do it?
That is hard. That is hard to answer. I should be able to answer that, though, right? Well, she's done it through the. I think through the way that she examines the relationships between people, and with her characters are somehow they're both ourselves and they're not ourselves. They're sort of more intense or larger. Larger than ourselves. I don't know. Larger doesn't seem like the right word. Deeper maybe. Yeah. I mean, certainly more complex, or they embody many aspects of ourselves.
That's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And we recognize things. We don't recognize things, but there's something that does just draw us into those characters, and I think that's how she does it. That's how she makes life not so prosaic.
I mean, sometimes I feel I've had a very prosaic day, and then the next day really has the same movement in it, same people, the same things, yet somehow it is not prosaic. Somehow or other, something has happened to transform that day, and it does have to do with just spending the time to see the infinite things inside the little things.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether Ferrante would feel happy about the word infinite. I mean, it starts to smell of mysticism, doesn't it? But let's say complexity.
No, but I think that's true. I think that's sort of what she does. Like there are these, I mean, just on it's almost a superficial level, but she does these great scenes of the crowd scenes, like the wedding at the end of the first book, or the scene where Elena comes back to Naples with her family for the first time, and she examines these sort of, you could say, well, it's a wedding, it's a dinner, but she gives you so many little aspects of it, and so many from so many angles that it becomes, just an incredible scene.
Everything's hooked up to something else.
Yes, and that's part of it.
Oh, it's very hard to do, though.
Very.
There are other things I want to talk about, but before, for example, I want to talk about your translation of Pasolini and the difficulty of translating sex. But before I do that, I just want to ask you about the writers that she loves, that Ferrante loves. She loves Virginia Woolf, is that right?
I think, yeah, she said that, yeah.
I don't really feel much Woolf in the book.
No, not really.
But that's all right. That's all right.
Yeah.
She loves, now this is really odd. I've heard that she loves Jane Austen.
She does love Jane Austen. She wrote an introduction, actually, to Sense and Sensibility. I think her...
Because someone said she's like an angry Jane Austen, but...
I don't know. I don't know.
But you don't have to write like the people you like.
You don't. No. I mean, I think Jane Austen's anonymity. I mean, the fact that Jane Austen was an anonymous lady, or I think that's what's a lady, that she liked the anonymous, the fact that she published anonymously. I mean, obviously for different reasons from Ferrante, but still, there was something about that, about not being the present, announcing yourself as the author. I think that she likes. But she's also, like the relationships between the two sisters in Sense and Sensibility was very compelling to her.
Oh, there are friendships in Jane Austen also.
And friendships also in Jane Austen.
Very, very difficult friendships and sometimes beset with envy. I mean,
Yes.
envy is a wonderful notion. It's different from jealousy. We often confuse them. But there's often envy in healthy friendships, it seems to me.
Yes, yeah, I agree. I think that's true.
Now, sex. I didn't find the sex scenes here very steamy, I must say. I was hoping for something a little steamier. But I believe that you have translated recently, is it recently, a short novel? Is it The Street Kids? of Pasolini.
Yes. But that's,
And I'm sure that Pasolini's got plenty of sex.
well, that is not his famous. There is some sex in that book, but it's not the way his earlier, well, actually later novel, Petrolio. That's the famous sex scene. This is the where the narrator. This is a novel that was unfinished when he died. That was this huge. It was a collection of. It was about 500 pages of notes. It's a very strange novel. I mean, actually, Persephone and Demeter play a large role in it. It's got this whole theme of the Eleusinian mysteries. Anyway, that's an aside. But it has a scene. His hero. It has a lot of sex in it. But the hero, first of all, he becomes two people. And then he becomes a woman, and he wants to experience all the possible sexual, have all the possible sexual experiences of a woman. And there's a famous chapter of this novel in which he goes to a field on the periphery of Rome, which was a favorite kind of place of Pasolini's. I mean, this type of place. And he has 20 young men come and have sex with well, him, her. I don't even know what to call him, her. And that's the famous sex scene.
Uh-huh.
So 20, it's all there. I mean, 20 different encounters.
And what was the difficulty for you as a translator in translating this?
Well, I mean, I think it's a difficulty of the original, is that it's a little boring. It's not. They're not that. The differences are subtle. But they're not that interesting.
No.
At least they weren't to me. I don't know. That's just something about me. But it was difficult because just these. I mean, how many ways can you say heaving and thrusting and this and that?
Yes, exactly.
Which was really what it was about.
I mean, I've translated mostly Turgenev and Chekhov. Mm-hmm. Well, there is no sex in Turgenev and Chekhov. If there's any threat of it, the story comes to an end.
Yeah.
I mean, Turgenev just finishes the novel, if anyone looks like having sex with anybody, and everyone goes home. So I've never had to actually do it. I did write one sex scene in a book of my own, one set in Italy, as a matter of fact, but I found it very difficult because it either is crude or it's banal.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's hard to avoid that. I mean, I think the one place where, there are two Ferrante sex scenes that I think are somehow avoid that. The one is, and they're not nice ones. I mean, the one is Leela's wedding night where she's essentially raped by her husband, and which is really about violence more than about sex. In a sense. And then in The Days of Abandonment, there's the sort of bad sex scene where she's trying to get over the fact that her husband has left her, and she sort of seduces the neighbor next door, and it's also a bad sex scene. It's not violent, but it's also just a bad sex. Doesn't work too well. So, I think those are ways of, I mean, if you want to say good sex scenes in the sense that they're powerful.
But they're well written in Italian? Powerful?
Yes. I mean, I think
Italian.
So. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how the English is, but I hope it's. But they're maybe you could say they're crude because what happens that they're crude in a sense because what happens is ugly.
It's not the same thing, is it? Crude and ugly aren't the same thing.
No. I mean, maybe I should have said just ugly. They're ugly scenes.
Another thing I want to ask you before we have questions is, what do you do? For example, you've translated Giampalahiri, who's written a book in Italian. She's not been speaking and writing in Italian for very long. I mean, it's just a few years. Is it 20 years?
Well, she started learning Italian about 20 years ago, and then she moved to Rome 3 years ago. And started writing. And that's when she started writing in Italian.
I mean, what do you do with Italian when you're writing a translation that you don't think is really terribly good? Do you write not terribly good English?
No. You can't. I mean, I don't know if I would say it was not terribly good English, but it's certainly a much simpler English the way her Italian is especially in the beginning of that book, is pretty simple and straightforward. I mean, the sentences are short, sort of declarative sentences. There aren't complicated ideas. I mean, and for someone who writes these sort of beautiful, complicated English sentences, it's a little startling. I think that people have found it, you know, most people, well, not most, but many people thought she shouldn't do it.
Yes. For example, Dostoevsky sometimes, because he wrote quite often in a hurry, he wrote in a fever, he needed money,
Right.
he often wrote for a magazine that would come out and had a deadline. He didn't always write very good Russian. And so there are now translations which are not in very good English to show.
To show that, yeah.
But you would be kinder, would you?
Well, I mean, probably.
Yes.
I mean, I would hope that by trying to stay close to the original, it would come out as maybe not bad English, but certainly, as I say, you know, simpler or lesser English. You know, well, I wouldn't try to elaborate to improve it. I guess that's where I would draw the line.
What do you do about assonance and alliteration and that kind of thing?
Well, Italian uses a lot of that. I mean, there's a lot of that in Italian, and it's much, in a way, it works better in Italian. I mean, sometimes I try to do that. Actually, Primo Levi often will use pairs of adjectives that are alliterative or whatever the adjective is for assonance.
Yes.
Assonant. And sometimes I would search for a pair in English. But sometimes in English, I mean, I think Italian does it a lot, can do it a lot more easily without it sounding obvious or heavy. And so I think a lot of times you don't want to imitate that.
Yes. I remember saying to Paolo Bartoloni, the Italian, well, he was a lecturer here in Melbourne who translated one of my books into Italian. I said to him once, you know, the important thing in this sentence is the alliteration. It is not the denotation. It's not the thing in the world that these words are pointing to. If I say she walked seductively, swaying her hips as she swished, I wouldn't write that, of course. But if I were to, I said to Paolo, it's the S that's important. It's the sibilance that's important. It's not the actual meaning. So I want you to, in Italian, to copy the poetics, not the denotation.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's a hard thing, of course, for the translator to decide what the important part is. But you're always having to decide what the writer, or you're having to make a decision about what is most important in every sentence or in every word, really. I mean, you would never find, or rarely find a word in both languages that has the same nuances.
No, of course not.
The same connotations. So you're always, you're choosing the connotation you think is the strongest in that particular case.
I sometimes feel, I don't know if you agree with me, that translating is a bit like asking a Hottentot who's just been to Greenland to build an igloo when he gets home back in Africa.
Yeah.
And he looks at you and says, but there is no ice, there is no snow. Build me an igloo. We have to do this in English, even though we haven't got any ice or snow.
No, exactly.
And we don't know how to build a dome, but somehow or other we have to do it. It's our job.
Yeah. Yes, it's true. It is like building an igloo with no ice.
But isn't it a pleasure? Don't you feel that it's almost a voluptuous pleasure to translate? I can't think of anything that gives me a deeper pleasure. And I mean that quite literally. It is just to spend, let's say, half an hour on one sentence.
Yeah.
Is heaven.
It is a pleasure. Well, if you get out of it a sentence that you think pleases you at the end of it.
Oh yes, if you come up with something.
It's just it can be just frustrating. No, but it is. It is a great pleasure.
Now they're going to want to ask questions, so I'm just going to ask one very last question, which you're going to answer very, very quickly, and that is, Coming to the end after, well, it must be over 10 years of translating one voice. What does it feel like? Do you feel that the ending has been a good ending for you, for the book, for...
I think that of the Neapolitan novels, I was very anxious when I was reading the fourth one about how it was going to end. But I thought that it was a wonderful ending. And so I was satisfied that those books had come to the end, had ended, really. I mean, I hope that Ferrante, and I don't know the answer to this question, I hope that she's writing something else.
But you are not in mourning.
No, I'm not in mourning. For those particular characters
for that
and those
world
lives. For their
that
world?
you've been part of. For that
No.
No.
I mean, I miss it in certain ways, but no, I feel that it was a complete world, in a sense, that it had, you know, a beginning, a middle, and an end, in a satisfying way.
Hi. This might be common knowledge already, so I apologise if it's an obvious question, but have you met the author? Did you have to meet with her and discuss anything with her?
No, not at all. No, because she's not known, and she's not known to me. And when I've had questions, I've written to the or talked to the publishers, and the Italian publishers are the only people, as far as I know who she is. And so I've always dealt with her through them.
Are there other questions?
Anna, notwithstanding that my surname is Greco and my best friend is Elena, I haven't read the books in English, but I wondered if you might tell us a bit about how Ferrante used the Neapolitan dialect, which undoubtedly her characters would have used every day, and what the challenges were for you in translating that.
Well, fortunately for me, she doesn't actually write in dialect. So I did not have to deal with Neapolitan dialect. I mean, she uses a few words of Neapolitan, but as in the English, in the Italian, well, she says so-and-so said in dialect, or said in dialect, or said in Italian, or said in beautiful Italian, and she continues writing in Italian. I mean, dialect is, it's the language of childhood, of families, of violence, of love, but she doesn't actually use it. But she manipulates, I guess you could say, by saying that someone is talking in dialect or not talking in dialect.
What about in Pasolini? Have you not had to translate Romanesco?
Yes, in the Ragazzi di Vita and Street Kids, there is definitely a Roman dialect, although he actually was someone, people have said that it's sort of Pasolini's version of Roman dialect.
So how did you deal with that?
I translated it as a sort of more colloquial English.
Okay.
I think it's, I wouldn't be able to me it seems that it would always be, it would not work well to actually use some kind of equivalent dialect, an English dialect. Well, in my case, like say a Brooklyn dialect, or a Brooklyn accent, or a Southern accent or something. I think it would just end up sounding false. I don't know, have you had that?
Yes, you get it in Chekhov, where
translation?
you have peasants and you have to translate peasants. They always end up sounding like farmers from Somerset, because dialect always is located.
Yeah.
I mean, listen to this little bit of Camilleri. Camilleri writes the Montalbano detective series, which some of you will know. I mean, the film is terrific, but I don't really enjoy the books as much as I enjoyed the TV series. But anyway, the door opens with a crash, and Montalbano, who'd been following the progress of a fly, jumped straight into the air. "Beckon your pardon, Chief. My foot slipped," said a mortified Cattarella. Cattarella's sort of village idiot. He'd had to knock with his foot because his hands were busy carrying a rather large parcel. "Is your package was delivered just now, and is supposed to be brung, 'tis poisonally in poison."
Are you?
Says who?
Oh.
Says right here on a package. Montalbano bent down to read, and so on and so forth.
Wow.
I'm not in Sicily when I hear that.
No, exact. That's the point. That's really.
Am I in
that's
Brooklyn?
exactly.
Where am I? I don't know.
Yeah, no, but that's why I think that that's a really dangerous road to take.
Doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
But it's difficult because you've got to show that
You've got to show that
Catarella
there's a difference, yeah.
doesn't speak standard
Right.
Italian somehow.
Yeah.
Okay, so another
Sorry.
one.
What do you think is the significance of the epigraph to the entire Neapolitan series?
It's I can't even say what it is. It's the Goethe, right?
I don't
have it with me. Yes, can you read it?
Therein thou art free, according to thy merits. The like of thee have never moved my hate. Of all the bold denying spirits, the waggish knave least trouble doth create. Man's active nature flagging seeks too soon the level. Unqualified repose he learns to crave. Whence willingly the comrade him I gave, who works, excites, and must create as devil.
I think it's the story of the narrator. I mean, I think it's her struggle and her story to deal with her childhood, the place she came from, the place she goes to, and the struggle between those two, the conflict between her, in herself, well, or in herself, some would say represented by her friend too, but I don't know, that's sort of how I've seen it, how I see it.
Is there another question? Yes. What was the hardest?
Well,
thing?
one of the hardest things is the sentences, which people have noticed are sort of run-on sentences in English. I mean, she does write these run-on sentences, especially when she's trying to get to the truth of, which she also talks about, getting to the truth of an emotion or a moment. And I think that making those sentences these sort of pile-ups of clauses work pretty well in Italian. And I think it's hard to make them retain their intensity, but make them into real English sentences. And I think I violated that sometimes because it seemed necessary. But that's the syntax. Those kinds of sentences are among the hardest to translate.
Did the language change over the 4 volumes?
I mean, people have asked about that, I think. It changed, not really. I mean, in the 4th volume, it does become somewhat more complex in the 4th volume, but there's a whole section, for example, about the history of Naples. And that was another part that was really hard, because those sentences are packed with information, with both information and emotion. Mm-hmm. And those were that part was very difficult. And there's nothing like that, I think, in the earlier volumes.
Sorry, can I just ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Moving away from Ferrante and thinking about the Primo Levi translations, mm-hmm. I'm very interested in translations, and recently I saw all the controversy with the Tim Parks.
Oh, yes.
You may have seen those, yeah. So what's your take on that? Because I don't think I have ever seen any response from you on what Parks said about your translations or your editing or the way that the whole process unfolded.
Well, I mean, it was actually, I didn't respond because it didn't seem appropriate for me to, it would have just sounded, I would have just said, you're wrong. I mean, what could I say? I mean, or that I hope he's wrong. One of the other translators of the Primo Levi volumes did respond to Parks. I don't know if you saw that. I can't see the person who's talking, by the way, so I'm a little bit, oh, okay. Oh, okay, thank you. He responded and said that, and sort of refuted Parks in terms of both the editing and in some of the individual complaints that Parks had. I don't know. I mean, I don't really know what to say. It was an unpleasant moment, I would say, for me, because I did think that it was all done I did work with the Italian Primo Levi Center. I mean, we spent a lot of time on all these issues, and I think I don't know why he was so negative about it, to tell you the truth. He had nothing good to say about, I don't know if you read this, but he had nothing good.
I didn't.
He had nothing good to say about the translation, about any of the well, actually he did like some of the translations about the project. He thought it was a bad idea. I mean, basically he didn't, and he apparently doesn't even like Primo Levi, so.
He doesn't like Jumper Lahiri either too much.
No, he was not very nice to me there either. He doesn't like me, clearly.
Oh, well, yes. Well, you have to kind of just allow him to say his piece, don't you really?
I think so.
And
I think you can't, there's no way to respond
how
to that.
people respond to your translations. We have 2 minutes. Is there another question? Here's a hand waving here in the light.
Thank you. I'm very interested in the relationship between an author and a translator. It seems to me it must be a very intimate one, and yet you haven't met this author. I presume she sought you out to translate her books. How did she respond when you submitted your translations to her? Did she just give you a carte blanche and was happy with what you did, or was there a lot of to and froing in terms of the finished product?
No, there wasn't. I mean, actually, it wasn't quite like that. It was the publishers were looking for a translator, and a few people tried out, and it was the publishers who chose me. I'm pretty sure, she reads English, and I think she read she may have read all the translations, but she hasn't complained about them. I mean, she, unlike Tim Parks, she seems to have liked them. She says that she trusts me. So that's a high compliment, I think, from the author.
But sometimes the relationship is not intimate.
Right.
I mean, I've had translators translating me that I have no relationship at all with, and others that I really got to know very well, who pointed out things to me that no one else had ever pointed out, because no one reads you with such attention.
Right.
As a translator, not your mother, nobody.
Nobody. No, it's true. No, nobody is really examining every word that you use.
Every word. And people whose language is not English will criticized my English and said, well, you are misusing this word, and why have you chosen this word and not that word? It's amazing. But you don't have to have that relationship with a translator. Sometimes it's at a distance, isn't it?
Yes.
But let's thank her for her generosity and openness.
Thank you.
Visit wheelercentre.com for the best in books, writing and ideas from Melbourne, Australia and the world.